Just to give this story some context, I've never experienced sleep paralysis before until today. With that being said, I'm extremely open to the paranormal, having had many experiences throughout my life. After a long day at the beach, my family decided it would be a good idea to start heading home. We were all pretty tired, and for some reason, we decided to take separate cars. My dad and my two brothers were in his work truck, and my mom and I were riding in the family SUV. By the time we packed up and began to head home, the sun was already starting to set. We had already been driving down the highway for about 5 or 10 minutes before I started to get drowsy. I could see my dad and my brothers in the back seat of the truck, a few lanes away. I rolled up my window and decided to listen to my iPod, and before I knew it, I drifted off. I woke up, but I immediately knew that something weird was going on. I had a strange, euphoric feeling. It kind of felt good. So I sat there not moving, not blinking, and now that I think about it, I wasn't even breathing. I was sitting there in the back seat, on the driver's side. Here in Australia, that's the right side of the vehicle. I was staring at the headrest in front of me. I tried to reposition myself to get comfortable so I could go back to sleep, but a huge wave of anxiety rolled over my entire body. I couldn't move. I couldn't turn my head or move my eyes. I couldn't even feel myself breathing. I tried to recompose myself, but the pressure and stress of the situation resonated throughout my body like water rushing through my veins. It was both hot and cold at the same time. I tried to call out to get my mom's attention, but I assumed that she was too focused on driving to realize, and that's when I saw it. It's hard to describe, but imagine yourself driving down the highway, only your eyes are closed. You can feel all the sensations, hear everything, you just can't see. That's how I felt, only when I used my peripheral vision, I could see that the traffic was moving in a sort of eerie slow motion. I've never had motion sickness before in my life, but after having the feeling of moving fast, but actually moving painfully slow, it made me nauseous. I could hear the music playing in my headphones, only it sounded deep and distorted. All of a sudden, the weight and pressure that I was feeling intensified. I desperately tried to fight the urge to throw up when I saw something in the corner of my eye. I regained my composure for a second and focused in on my peripheral vision. A large white 18-wheeler came screeching off the in-ramp and veered across the lanes. Seeing it in slow motion only made it more heart-racing. I gasped and tried to scream. The inky thing I could feel was my heart. It felt like it was leaping out of my chest, literally about to burst through my ribcage. The 18-wheeler completely took out my dad's truck. I saw my dad's truck flip and roll under it as both vehicles came smashing into the SUV. Everything was moving slower than before. The initial impact felt like it lasted minutes. The windshield smashed immediately. I could see the metal twisting and crunching, getting closer and closer. It felt like time actually stopped at this point, and the mass-twisted pile of glass was inches away from me. All of a sudden, the pressure started to lift, and the wreckage slammed into my body. That's when I woke up. I was in the same position in my car, only I could move. I started to freak out, and Mom was like, "Are you alright? Do you need some water?" I told her that I felt like I was going to throw up, and she pulled over. We were in front of my dad, so they also pulled over and parked behind us. I got out of the car as traffic rushed past us. I started to hyperventilate a little bit. I began to calm down when I saw a white 18-wheeler coming up the in-ramp. It swerved and cut across 2 or 3 lanes. It almost loomed as if it was going to tip. Luckily, the driver regained control and no one was hurt. My heart dropped as I realized that in my sleep paralysis, I had some kind of premonition, and that if I hadn't gotten my mom to pull over, that truck may have obliterated my whole family. My sister developed sleep paralysis in the 1st grade, an unusual age to be having such menacingly realistic dreams caused by stress or outside forces, something none of us could understand. It got to the point where she would stay up nights on end, sleeping in after an unfocused day at school in the light of the living room, only to be up another night without rest. Frankly, we were getting worried about Amy, and we didn't know what to do. A parent's worst nightmare, their child consumed by a sickness they couldn't understand. The doctors always said the same thing: a nightlight, a teddy bear, something generally comforting to aid her in sleep. But she was 7, not some 4-year-old who couldn't for the life of them understand what was going on. She knew that the dreams always started and ended the same, and that she couldn't find comfort in much that would lessen the terror caused by such. She always said the same thing: a lady who stood over her bedside, hair too long and straggly, smile too wide, eyes too large. And she would whisper that she was going to steal Amy's body. My sister would shake and scream until she woke herself. She said that she knew that one day the woman would succeed. We just saw them as all too realistic dreams. One night my sister woke from a severely horrible nightmare of sleep paralysis, and she wandered into my room, where she tugged on my shirt to wake me. Seeing her in the pitch black dark of the room was a bit unnerving, seeing as she was wide awake, and it was the middle of the night, and I was confused why she hadn't crawled into bed with Mom and Dad. I'm sick of waking them up at night. Tony, will you come sleep with me in my bed? I was a little unsure, being a teenager and wondering if this was weird or not, but she was my little sister, so I sucked it up. She smiled and said, "Good. You're my older brother, so you protect me. They keep trying to tell me to keep things that give me comfort in my room." I slept there for a couple of nights before her constant thrashing around and waking in bed had been enough. And then I started a routine of reading her stories until she fell asleep. I then crawled out of her bed and started sleeping on the floor. My parents would sometimes walk in and check on us, and thought it was the sweetest thing that their teenage son was sleeping on the floor watching over his sister. Meanwhile, I woke up with a feeling of a broken back every single morning. Amy woke up thrashing one night. Her eyes were wide open, but every other thing about her told me that she was still sleeping. I tried to get things under control, but as I stood to my feet and came near her bed, she started waving her arms around as if controlled by some otherworldly thing, and yelled, "Don't! Don't!" I knew that she was struggling with whatever was haunting her dreams, so I met her by the bedside and woke the sleeper, something you're never supposed to do. She woke up in an instant, with tears streaming down her face, and then she fucking punched me. I mean with adrenaline-induced inhuman strength for the little girl that was my sister. She was a menace, and then she snapped out of it. I stared at her from my fallen position on the floor. "I don't know what happened," she cried. "I'm so sorry. Don't leave me here in my room. Please don't be mad." And well, I was there the next night, clear as day. I resumed my spot on the floor after she was peacefully snoring in bed. This time, it was only after about 20 minutes of her sleeping that she woke up, for lack of a better term, woke and started screaming. My sister was absolutely terrified. Her blanket flew off the bed and covered me on the floor. I crawled out from under, struggling to regain my balance as I stood. Standing at the end of the bed, my sister stared at me with wide eyes and screaming, "Come, come." So I listened to her. When I did, she knocked me to the floor and woke up, and the entire fiasco had repeated itself just like the night before. By this point, I was kind of getting scared by these night terrors. Something as simple as sleep paralysis giving my sister this strength, like something was inside her, controlling her, giving her the strength to harm her brother, The person she thought could save her from this. Third night in a row, the blanket hit, and I tried a new approach. Her eyes burst open, and she was screaming, attempting to swat at something imaginary in front of her. I called out from under, sneaking a peek at the bed. Her eyes pointed to the left of her bed, where they always were, searching for me or something. I steadily walked to the other side, but before I even got there, her head snapped in my direction and she screamed,
"Closer."
I walked closer as we met eyes, and I was about to wake her from her slumber when her sweaty grip held onto my shirt and I trembled in front of her. "I'm awake." She then threw me to the floor. I scurried backward on my legs, and my sister bolted from the bed with adrenaline pumping her to the exit of the room. She grabbed my hand on the way out and slammed the door behind us. "What the fuck?" I yelled at my sister. Our parents were now waking up and crawling out of bed. I felt instantly bad that I had cursed in her face, but she was scaring the crap out of me, and I was utterly confused by what just happened. "I woke up in the middle of this dream," she said. "I've been warning you for a couple of nights. Don't come closer." "What?" I asked, shaking my head. I pieced together all the things my sister had been saying to me over the past few nights, how she had thrown me to the floor. I told her about the crazy things that she'd been doing, without even knowing it. "Well, this time I woke up," she started, tears pouring down her face, voice turning into a whisper as our parents came into the hallway. "The lady that stands over my bed tried to grab a hold of you. I saw her trying to climb into your mouth when it was hanging open. Don't come closer." The pushing. My sister had been trying to save my life from whatever hell lived in that room. The distinct feeling of something in my mouth came to light, and I reached a finger behind one of my front teeth, only to pull out a fingernail. I want to say up front, for the record, that I have zero belief in the paranormal, and I believe all of what I'm about to tell you is simply a product of the amazing human brain. That said, I realize that others will think differently and appreciate this story, and it doesn't mean this whole thing hasn't ever creeped me out. It did, and still does. Anyway, I work overnight at a funeral home. Basically, I babysit the place by myself all night. If someone croaks in the night, I'm there to answer the phones and dispatch someone for the body. I clean up a little and get a few things ready for the funerals the next day. Not the most glamorous job, but the job market sucks right now. And even with my few duties, I end up with hours to kill every night. I'm technically not supposed to sleep on the job. That said, I sometimes do. I'll nod off at the desk, or sometimes I'll go lay down on one of the couches and take a power nap. I'm alone all night, other than the handful of bodies in different rooms, and it's boring. I think most people would do the same. The weird thing is, sleep paralysis is pretty common for me when I fall asleep at work. Although there have been very few times when someone has shown up at the funeral home in the middle of the night unannounced, I'm always fearful that one of the directors will show up unexpectedly and catch me sleeping. I believe this fear causes me to sleep lightly and to have sleep paralysis because I rarely have it at home. Now, for those of you who have never had sleep paralysis, basically it's like this. Your eyes are open and you're seeing your surroundings, but you're not actually awake. So sometimes you can still see or hear dream things, like maybe you see something that isn't there or whatever, and you can't move. It feels as though you're being held down and you can't wake up. It feels as if you're straining against something when you try. As for myself, I usually can snap myself out of it and wake up if I strain and thrash against it hard enough. And then I finally wake up and am able to move. Google it if you want more information about it. It's pretty interesting. Now on with the weirdness that began to happen when I would slip into sleep paralysis during a nap. The first was the music. Sometimes I would find myself lying there with my eyes wide open in sleep paralysis, and I would begin to hear music, loudly and vividly. It was almost always Christian gospel music, but modern stuff like you would hear on the radio. It always sounded like it was coming from inside my skull, particularly in my mouth area. This sounds stupid, but at one point, I was beginning to wonder if I was picking up some AM Christian station in my feelings and was only sensitive enough to hear it while I was asleep, or maybe when my mouth was hanging open and dried out. I even went as far as to remember one of the lyrics from the songs and Google it when I woke up, although it didn't appear to be a real song. Sorry, I can't remember the lyric anymore. This was months and months ago. Then the weirder things started happening. Sometimes I would fall into sleep paralysis. I would think I heard someone walking toward me from one of the hallways. Fearing that an employee had shown up unsuspectedly, I would always frantically strain against the sleep paralysis and wake up. At which point, the sounds of the footsteps were gone. After that, I would always feel foolish for getting tricked by some dream sounds. This went on for months and months, the music and the footsteps. Always when I heard the footsteps, I would have to err on the side of caution and force myself awake in case it really was another employee, only to be annoyed at having gone through the effort for nothing and having ruined a perfectly good nap. One night, I was really tired and napping on the couch. I slipped into this state and I heard the footsteps. I decided, screw it. I wasn't going to get tricked by my sleep paralysis for the millionth time. So I just laid there, expecting that I would either eventually wake up normally without the strain, or I would go back to full sleep, or the footsteps would continue the way the music always did if I just laid there stuck in that state. But to my complete surprise, the footstepper showed himself. I was laying on my back, stretched out. A man came walking up from the direction of my head, coming into my field of view and stopping directly next to me. There was nothing memorable about him, just a white male in some kind of dress shirt and slacks, except for one thing. His face and head were obscured, more like blurred out, just like they do on the news for anonymous witnesses or whatever. His face and head were obviously there, but I could see nothing but a smeary blur. Then to my horror, he reached out and poked me lightly in the forehead and let out a kind of sinister chuckle. Sinister is probably the wrong word. It was more like he was laughing as if to say, "Yeah, feel real brave now, don't you?" And at that point, of course, I snapped myself awake and found myself alone, as always. It was very disturbing, of course, to say the least. Probably not as much for most, though, to be honest, because I truly have no belief in ghosts or the paranormal and chalked it up to my brain tricks. But since then, it's happened twice more. The second time I saw someone, I found myself with my eyes open, staring at, I shit you not, a woman wearing a rubber clown mask and holding a gun at her side, just staring at me passively. Thankfully, I knew right away that it was just my sleep paralysis, and I didn't panic, but I was unnerved enough to force myself awake and cause the woman to vanish. The third time was similar to the first. I was laying on the couch, and this time, a small child approached me from behind. I think it was a boy, but I can't say for sure. Probably about 6 or 7, and his face was also blurred in the same way the man's had been. He giggled once in amusement, and I was immediately scared to the point that I forced myself awake. Of all the times that this has happened, that was by far the most disturbing. And that's it. That's my story. Sorry it doesn't have a better resolution, but this is all true, and I don't believe that there's anything paranormal going on here. But it's fucking freaky, no? Hey guys, Unit 522 here, and I want to thank you very much for watching my video. I would appreciate it very much if you would share, like, and comment. And if you're new to this channel, become one with the Unity by hitting the subscribe button. If you have a scary story or experience that you want featured on this channel, you can always send it to my email or post it on the Free Horror Stories subreddit. The links for those can be found in the description below. If you would like to help out this channel even more, consider a PayPal donation. And for more updates, be sure to follow me on Twitter. There's nothing wrong with a little darkness in your life, as long as you never forget, there's always a reason to be afraid.